My name is Michael Rubino. I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Never Been Sicker. I am your host, Michael Rubino, and today's very special guest, Dr. Torkil Færø. Dr. Torkil Færø, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here with us and share your knowledge.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's been real busy. Yeah.
Yep. No, I mean, you're never not busy when it comes to health and well-being and all the things we talked a little bit offline. I want to just kick it off with the fact that, one of the unfortunate things that we have to talk about, so the name is in the podcast. We have never been sicker than we are today. Over 60% of the global population is dealing with chronic illness. I'd love for you to comment on that and talk about your experience with what you're seeing and offer any insights as to why that is and how we can reverse course here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is why I have written the book, The Pulse Cure, which is all about getting rid of the chronic diseases by finding ways to mitigate stress and all the stressors on our system. Because the frustration, because I'm a medical doctor, seeing lots of patients, and most of them deal with chronic diseases. And the frustrating part is that they wouldn't need to come to my office. If they had followed the advice in the Pulse Cure, they would have been healthy, or at least way healthier than they are currently. So, unfortunately, our way of living, both in the US and in Norway and all over, probably now all over the world. I think even in countries like Africa and poorer countries, they are moving straight from third world diseases into, modern first world diseases. They're just skipping, just like they skipped from telephones with the lines, and telephone poles straight into cellular phones. They're going straight from poverty diseases into the rich world diseases, I would say, which is chronic diseases. And there are ways to avoid that, and that is what I'm talking about in my book. That is what the wearables can help us with, because the heart rate will reveal the state of our body. Not surprisingly, that would have been well known even by the ancient Greeks and Egyptian doctors and Indian doctors and so on. And of course, even at the ER, the first thing I'm looking for in a patient would be the heart rate. If the heart rate is okay, I know so much about the state of the patient. But what we're really talking about is heart rate variability, which is like watching the heart rate with a magnifying glass. You can tell so much more from heart rate variability than you can with just a pulse rate in itself. So, and I'm sure you're into indoor climate, into mold, as I understand, and I'm sure that would also be detected in the heart rate variability. So I'm not sure if you have seen it or heard anything about that, but I'm sure that a home that is getting rid of mold would see different heart rate variability in the inhabitants.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Actually, we had a customer last year. She wears the Whoop, and she noticed her heart rate variability improved dramatically after she actually fixed the mold in her house. She removed the mold, right? Those stressors went away, and all of a sudden her heart rate variability went up, and it went up pretty significantly, which was really interesting because obviously today we have a lot of the wearable technologies that we can really track and measure things that we never really tracked before. So to be able to actually see that and quantify that was really, really interesting. And of course, opens our eyes to the fact that, we need to be paying more attention to things like heart rate variability with respects to the indoor air quality that we're breathing in. And so, I thought you might find that interesting.
Yeah, and we may need to explain what heart rate variability is and why it's so important. And heart rate variability is the variation between heartbeats. So if we are in the restful state, okay, the autonomic nervous system of the body, the real basic system in our bodies, is divided in two parts. The sympathetic stressful part, the fight, flight, and freeze part, and the restful parasympathetic part, the rest and digest part. And the heart rate will behave differently in those two states. This is why we can use the wearables to find out our stress levels. And then if we are in the restful state, the parasympathetic state, when we breathe in, the heart rate goes up. And when we breathe out, the heart rate goes down to save some energy while there's less oxygen in the lungs. But if we are in the stressful state, the body will work kind of at full speed, and the heart will beat as steadily as a metronome or a clock, signifying that the system interprets this situation as dangerous and we need to use all available forces, even if there is less oxygen in the lungs, because this organism might not survive the next day. This is an ancient system. It doesn't know that we are in 2025. It still works, on the operative system of the savannah 100,000 years ago. So when the wearables can track this, they can find out whether you are stressed and quantify the stress level and see if it's sustainable stress or not. And I'm sure that people getting sick from mold or other problems will see that their body is struggling, and you will see it in the heart rate.
Yeah, no, it's extremely interesting. And like I said, it's it's not a metric that many of us have been tracking before with regards to air quality, and it wasn't brought up until that client literally was like, "Hey, I don't know if you are aware of this, but my heart rate variability improved dramatically." And it's interesting because you wrote a book called The Pulse Cure, and obviously we're talking about heart rate variability and using these metrics that, to be honest, aren't a lot of people don't know about, right? And so I would love, without giving too much away, because I know reading the book is going to be the most important part of this, but I would love for you to kind of dive into, how you've really come about finding this information out and using this in practice to help people.
It was kind of accidental. I was reading a book called The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk, which is a huge multi-million copy bestseller. And he's an American psychiatrist, and he's talking about how he was using heart rate variability as a biometric to estimate the state of the psychiatric patients. And that this was an estimate of the autonomic nervous system. And of course, I understood that this is hugely important. To have an ability to track your autonomic nervous system is one of the most important biomarkers we can pay attention to. And then as I got home, because I was reading this on a sailing trip to French Polynesia, as I got home, I became aware that we have devices that can track this. For the first couple of years, I used an ECG device that was taped to my chest and that I was using every day for 2 years. And then I became aware that we have this system in the Garmin watches, and I could compare it to my readings from the ECG monitor, and I could see that they were accurate enough for everyday use. So I understood that this is super important. This is a tool that you can buy for like $250, and it gives you the power and insight and control of your own health in a degree that is really needed, especially for the chronic illnesses that we are talking about here. And I wrote a book which has been just a tremendous bestseller in Norway, translated into 7 languages, and has really changed my life totally. So that is part of the backstory here. So and of course I like to spread the word to people on how they can use this tool that many people already have. Like you have the Apple Watch on your wrist, which can also be used. I would say it's not as good as the Garmin, unfortunately, but absolutely is a huge step from just guesswork.
Totally. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think the begging question is, what should people aim for in terms of heart rate variability? You know, how do people know if it's too low, if it's too high? What's sort of that sweet spot? What should people be looking for? And I saw that you mentioned the Garmin. Is that kind of your favorite device when you compared it to the legitimate ECG machine that you have?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the favorite device, yeah. And it has a very intuitive way of conveying the information. You have a body battery system from like a 0 to 100. You can see in the morning how much have you charged energy, physiological energy during the night, how much are you using during the day. And you can tap the watch and see in the moment, okay, my stress level is 27 on a scale from 0 to 100. So you can always see your physiological speed or intensity, just like you could compare it to driving the car and see your speed in miles. Here you can see your stress levels measured in heart rate, using heart rate variability to find the speed. Like here in the car is like miles an hour, on the watch is milliseconds in compared to the heart rate variability.
Wow.
So definitely the Garmin watches would be number one for the people who are interested in micromanaging their stress levels. If you just want some insight into it, you can use the Apple Watch, you can use an Oura Ring or the Whoop Band, and many other devices.
Yeah, my wife just got the Oura Ring, and I've had this Apple Watch probably a little over a year now. And so, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it is usually my philosophy. So to get a ring and a watch and have all these different things, I was like, do I really need to? But it sounds to me like, you know, they all have probably some strengths and weaknesses, you know, that need to be considered. I think the Aura seems to be really good with sleep tracking, from my
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Oura Ring is really good also. So with the Apple Watch, you can use an app called Athletic. It's a combination between athlete and analytic. So and that would cost probably $30, and that would look quite a bit like the Garmin graphs that I get on my Garmin.
Okay, so there's some apps and stuff like that. I also saw that there's they're making some technology in the straps themselves for the Apple Watch that might make some improvements to
All
tracking
right.
certain metrics, which seems interesting.
All
I don't
right,
know if
yeah,
you've seen anything
good.
like that.
And the good part of this from the doctor's side is that there's money involved in keeping you healthy, because now is too much money involved in sick people, in waiting until people get sick and then treating them with medications and procedures and surgical procedures and so on. So that there's money into showing you how to be healthier, that is a really, really good thing, I think.
No, I think that's great because then we can prevent disease instead of wait for it to happen and then try to work hard to fix it, right? And it's
Yeah.
always 10 times harder to fix it once you've gotten the disease rather than preventing it in the first place. Is that right?
Absolutely, and you may not even find a cure for it, and it would be out of your control. So, how you do the different strategies in the pulse cure, the effort that you need to do to stay healthy, you have control of this. How much you exercise, how you sleep, what you eat, how well good you are at, mitigating stress and so on with breath work and different techniques. So there's some effort involved, but that I see as a doctor is that if you don't do that and just hope for the best, then the effort after you get sick is a lot worse, a
Right.
lot harder, and out of your control and in the hands of the doctor and the healthcare system.
I want to drill down into some specifics here. So there's a famous quote that's coming to mind right now. What gets measured gets
It's
managed,
managed. Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
so what we're talking about is we're talking about measuring our biometrics so that we can better manage our health, right?
Yeah.
But what does that really look like, right? I mean, certainly I'm going to take some measurements today. I'm going to get a baseline of where I am, And how do I take these steps towards working healthy? You know, give us some high level overview of what we expect to get out of reading the Pulse Cure.
Yeah, you would find, for example, that you can do things to improve your sleep. So the sleep is the first chapter after you have some introduction into to the specifics of heart rate variability and the autonomic nervous system and physiology, immune system, and so on. Then I call it an expedition with different stages. I call it an expedition because it will be hard. You need to brace yourself for some effort because it will not come for free. You have to put some effort into it to get the rewards. And it starts with sleep because once you improve your sleep, you get more energy, you get more willpower, and you will be able to do the different next stages of this expedition later. So maybe the most important thing the watches and rings can do is to have an estimate of your sleep quality. And when you start, you would see that, okay, if you drink alcohol, that would be terrible for your sleep quality. I used to think that it would be very good for my sleep quality. I used to do all the mistakes in my book, absolutely all of them, including drinking alcohol every day, because that was recommended by doctors then 15 years ago. And I even thought it would calm me down and be good for me. But when you see on your monitor, on your device, you can see that alcohol is the very worst thing you can do. And Whoop, that tracks their users and they know what they are doing. So when they are tagging alcohol, that is the worst stressor of all. And so you will improve your sleep by staying away from alcohol, for example, and staying away from evening meals. You will quickly find out that your heart rate variability overnight and your sleep quality will be better if you push the latest meal of the day maybe to 3 hours before you go to bed. And you would find that your room temperature will have a lot to say on the degree of recovery during the night. You will see that if you wind down the last 1 or 2 hours before you go to bed, that will improve your sleep quality. And also your sleep consistency, if you manage to sleep at the same time more or less every day. And these devices will usually have some AI coach when it comes both to sleep and to exercise. So sleep would be very important. And then you would also see that a lot of food will stress you. So I could see, and I had never thought about that. I'd never even crossed my mind that different food could stress my body in different ways. It was not what we learned in medical school, to say the least. And but you quickly find out that food will affect your stress levels quite a lot, at least for many people. And what I found that was like bakery goods, things containing gluten and milk, would stress my system and ruin my sleep. If I eat a late night pizza, I'm in a stress level all night long, almost as bad as having alcohol. So in this way, you will be able to let your heart rate identify stressors that you may never have thought about, or find stressors that you knew, but you didn't know to what extent that they would stress your system, just like alcohol. So, and in practice, when you start getting these devices, you're just starting a journey discovering what goes on under the hood. It's just like having a dashboard in your car, but here you have a dashboard into your own physiology. And it's probably like you're probably measuring things about indoor climate, right?
Yeah.
You're taking measurements so that you can see before and after. And here it's exactly the same thing. So from patterns of movement and from the heart rate, from the temperature and from the oxygen level that can be measured by these devices, they can tell you so much about your physiology. And it's easy accessible and it's actionable results that you get so that you can change your lifestyle.
No, that's really good advice. First off, I think, I actually had the Whoop for a while and wore the Whoop. I think I had 2.0. I think there's on a 4.0 or 5.0 these days, right? Technology moves
5.0
pretty
is
quick.
getting out right this week, actually.
Right this week. There we go. Right. So,
Hmm.
one of the things that I realized early on was how much alcohol destroyed my sleep. And, I rarely drink these days. Last time I actually had a drink was New Year's Eve, right? So we're 5 months in. Yeah, it's interesting because it wasn't until I really saw that, just like you said, that it made me realize, because I guess intrinsically you'd be like, oh, I slept like a baby, right? I had a drink or two, I slept like a baby, but no, you actually don't sleep like a baby, or maybe you sleep like a baby that has colic and is, upset half the night and keeping you up. But it was really interesting. The other thing that I realized for me was, gluten doesn't do well for me. I don't know what it is specifically, but when I eat just breads, pastas, not only do I feel bloated, but I just pack on weight that you wouldn't believe. And whatever that does to my body specifically, I don't know, but it's a problem. And they're growing up, I knew the skinniest people that like just seemed to be able to eat nothing but cheesesteaks and pizzas and be fine. That just was never me. So I pretty much have to eat a pretty strict diet of, meats and vegetables, and really try to limit the amount of carbohydrate, bread and pastas, those types of refined carbohydrates, right?
Exactly, and you would have that in common with so many people.
Yeah.
And when you see these results, then it's so much easier to manage it and to resist the temptation of having those bakery goods and then going for some salads instead, for example.
Yeah. How about sugar? I think sugar to me always it seems like another one of those like refined carbohydrates. It seems to be not so great.
Yeah. Yeah, sugar can be a problem, and particularly when it's combined in the ultra processed food, like chocolate, like candy, like sweets. In those kind of foods that are addictive, like these hyper palatable foods that makes you addicted, that you will find at the end of the grocery store when you don't have any willpower left, and you just grab something to eat, and then you would see that this would stress your system. I think sugar, even more in that combination, is worse than just sugar in itself, I think.
Yeah. No, that makes good sense. All right. So we talked about some stressors. So we talked about indoor air quality being a stressor, right? Poor indoor
Mm.
air quality, breathing in
Yeah.
stuff that's not great for you. That's a stressor. We talked about food, how food could be a stressor, alcohol, how alcohol could be a stressor, and how all that plays into the role of sleep, which is so important. Um, what are some other stressors we need to be concerned about?
Yeah, there would be different. But I would also say, just as a reminder with the indoor climate, that I just thought actually today that the biggest migration in history is not from Europe to the Americas. It's from being outside, outdoors, and getting indoors. Because 200 years ago or 100 years ago, most of your life was lived outdoors. And now Americans, I know, they live 94% of the time indoors. And then, of course, it would be hugely important to have a good indoor climate. And probably even better than me that I think the air quality in most people's homes is like 10 times worse than
Yeah.
than in a polluted city or something, or so I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
it's
not great.
super important. It's,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
correct.
curious. Where Americans probably are 94%. I believe it, hands down. I mean, I'm indoors right now, right? To be honest, I'm probably one of those people 94% indoors because
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
constantly in front of my computer and constantly,
Yeah.
working from home. So,
Yeah.
what about Europeans? What is it that high?
It would probably be pretty much the same. Maybe a bit less for the healthiest people. But the sickest people, the 70%, they would be indoors probably. And and that is also something that we can see in the heart rate variability. And it would be probably most due to the lack of sunlight. We really need the sunlight. It is pure energy going into our mitochondria and our cells and improve the metabolism. You will get more energy out of the food you get, and the mitochondria will work better with a certain amount of sunlight. Doesn't necessarily need to be more than a half an hour or an hour, but I would say minimum should be half an hour every day out in direct sunlight. And we would be able to see that in the heart rate variability. And particularly in Norway, I often work above the Arctic Circle. That's probably compared like to Alaska or something. And of course, many people in Norway, they would take their holiday in the winter and go, fly 4 or 5 hours south to get to the Canary Islands or some warm place. And then they would immediately see that their heart rate variability may even double. And suddenly their symptoms go away and they feel a lot better. And their heart rate also will reveal it. So particularly in the north, we have a lot of sun deficiency, I would call it. So that would be one stressor that will lead to that you have less energy in the winter compared to the summer.
That's so interesting. Yeah, thank you for kind of making that distinction. How does movement play into all this?
Yeah, movement plays in a lot. I often find that actually working in the ER for me is the most calming thing I can do. And I think it's both because it's a job that I'm used to and that I will be moving regularly. I will not be sitting down. You're sitting down to write what you find about the patient and to interview them and talk to them, and then you would go walking around in the ER and so on. So you would be constantly moving and in a slow pace, usually, unless there's a huge emergency, of course. And I think moving regularly throughout the day is really important. So if you have an office job, you should every half hour, I think, you should do 1 or 2 minutes of have a skipping rope or doing some shadow boxing or run up and down the stairs and move. Get your blood flowing, your lymph flowing, and so on. And also you should make sure that you have a good VO2 max, a good fitness level, which would be measured in your Garmin. So you would get a measurement that would tell you the state of your fitness level and also compare it to your biological age. And the most important thing is to not be in the lowest quarter of people. That is where disease happens. So you should make sure that maybe for your age, maybe you should make sure that you have more than 40 in VO2 max, for example. Then you would be quite resilient and have a robust physiology and be less prone to have the chronic diseases that we are talking about. And to have that measurement and be able to move it in the right direction is important. A good friend of mine, was in a poor state just half a year ago. He had 33 in VO2 max, which is really poor. And he managed just in a half a year to go up to 41 in VO2 max. And that moves his risk of contracting a disease a long way towards health. So, and then it's motivating for him, of course, to see that he can see the numbers on his watch.
Yeah, to really be cause over your own destiny is such a beautiful thing, right? To be able to look at these and measure them and say, all right, how am I going to improve it? And just taking those small steps to improving each day really provides like a level of comfort over mastering, your life, right? That you don't ordinarily see. So I'm assuming that all he did was maybe work out a little bit more, move the body a little bit more.
Starting running, starting jogging, yeah. Jogging, I think, is probably one of the best ways to improve. And maybe if you start from a poor level, you may not be able to be running the whole time. Maybe walk half the time, run half the time. And to check on your watch, the Garmin watch will give you a recovery time after your workout, and make sure that the recovery time is not too long. Maybe that you shouldn't have a recovery time more than 24 hours, for example.
Right. I guess the other point is for VO2 specifically, is that like a Garmin specific metric, or is that even in the Apple Watch?
Yeah, I think the Apple Watch is quite accurate as well. My Oura Ring is not accurate on this. So probably, or at least when I've been asking people at Apple Watch, I think that the number that you will get there is quite okay.
And this is because I have an Apple Watch, so I'm gonna in real time. What icon am I looking for? I see there's like a heart
The
one.
Apple Health probably.
Apple Health, okay. So not the one that says the steps and all that fun stuff. It's gonna be
Maybe.
okay.
I haven't been wearing it for a couple of years.
But if not, I can always connects to my phone. So I think I've got a bigger application set in my phone where I can really play around with this. Well, I'm gonna find out what my VO2 level is. I'm gonna put it in the show notes so that other people can see. But
cool.
I for sure now that you've brought all this to my attention, I for sure am be paying more attention to the heart rate variability, the VO2 levels, and playing a game with myself to increase those scores. I think that's
because that is what it is. It's a gamification of your own health, where it's your own health and life that is at stake, and not just an avatar in a video game. So most people think it's fun. A lot of people think, oh, this would be stressful to get this insight. But usually most people think it's a fun game, and that it will give you an interesting insight into what goes on under the hood.
No, they're really amazing. Any bonus points if you're working out outside, right? Because then you get some sun as well.
I think, for example, running or walking outside under the sunlight would be really, really important. Often we have known, of course, that, for example, gardening is good, and we have been theorizing: is it the soil? Is it the touch of the leaves and so on? But of course, when you're out there, you're under the sunlight also. So
yeah. So you said something earlier about how doctors have kind of shifted their mindsets a little bit. They're more there is money to be made in proactive care and getting people healthy and preventing disease, as opposed to just waiting for disease to happen and then feed into that. And so I guess the biggest question is, do you see a big shift in the medical community? Though the term biohacking comes to mind, are more doctors adopting biohacking? Give us a little bit of a landscape.
I think so that a lot of doctors, they are aware of the new science. Like, for example, I understood, I'm not sure if Casey Means has been appointed Surgeon General, but just the fact that she is mentioned and probably a candidate for the job is really good, because she's really, if you listen to her podcast on Huberman Lab podcast, she's really, really sharp, and she knows so much about metabolic health and what to do, just like we have been talking about here. So to have doctors that are not only focused on medications after you get sick, but that knows what needs to be done to avoid it, that's really, really encouraging, I think. So I think things will change, but the most important thing is that you don't need for the healthcare system to change. You can change straight away, right? And I must say that when you have read or listened to the audiobook of the Pulse Cure, you know probably more about preventative healthcare than 90% of the doctors, at least in Norway, and probably in the US as well. So we are not educated in that field. We are not educated to create health. We are educated to categorize disease and find the right medication. So I think that will change, and I think the change will be pushed forwards by people like you. Yeah,
that's amazing. No, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. So the Pulse Cure, right? We've talked a lot about it today. It sounds like a very exciting book. I'm going to be ordering mine as soon as we hang up here, because I definitely this has been an angle that I have not thought much about, and definitely want to learn more about. So I really appreciate you covering this. Anything else high level in this book that we need to cover today so that people really lean into getting a copy of this book?
Yeah, I would be talking about, you said your wife had the Oura Ring, and particularly for women, this is important to track their menstrual cycle, because the week before menstruation becomes visible as a strain on the heart rate variability. And the strain will often be as huge, you can see the difference as huge as in a strong COVID infection.
Wow.
And for the same amount of time, it would last a week for many people, many women troubled by PMS symptoms, for example. And when it becomes visible like that, you understand that it's not only a different mood or a different feeling or being annoyed and snappy and all of these things. Is a physiological change that is measurable in heart rate variability. And the good thing is that it is avoidable. When you can see that week coming on the Oura Ring or the Whoop or whatever, then when you're able to mitigate the stress, make sure that you sleep more, that you rest more, that you do your workouts, maybe do a yoga instead of a high intensity training and so on, that you resist the temptation of comforting yourself with chocolate and sweets or alcohol, then you can flatten that curve and be relieved of the PMS symptoms to a large degree. So that I think is important.
No, it's an incredible tip. I mean, definitely makes a lot of sense, right? You don't want to limit any sort of stressors because it's already a natural stressor.
Yeah.
Any other subjects in this book that we should be excited to uncover?
It would be breath work as a way to calm yourself down from a mentally stressed situation. Okay, if you have been eating a pizza, you said you didn't tolerate gluten very well. If you have been eating a pizza and having had a couple of beers, your body would be highly stressed. And then it wouldn't necessarily be possible to take your stress levels down by doing breath work. Your body is just pushing hard. But if you are stressed from a mental reason, maybe you have been stressed because of a meeting or because another person is annoying you, or you are just, hyper aroused for whatever reason, then you can breathe yourself to a calmer state by breathing slowly, by breathing 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out, for example, or other kinds of breath work can be used as well, of course. But that is probably the best way of controlling the stress levels, using the breath work. And
That's
also
great.
doing cold plunges could be good, cold showers, cold plunges, and so on. Or being out in the cold. So depends, of course, where you live. Florida would not probably be the best place to get cold, but
Right.
there are so many, small ice. I'm not sure what they call it, but you could put it on your balcony or
Definitely.
in your garden. Yeah. So that I think is really fascinating, to how you can use temperature to improve your physiology.
I think that's fascinating as well. Yeah, I do not have a cold plunge myself, but I've heard nothing but fantastic things for all those who dare. But it's definitely something I'm worth trying. I'd like to try it just to see the benefits, and see if it's something that I need to invest in to do more regularly.
Yeah, and when you see the result, because it's never comfortable going into the cold shower, but when you can see the results afterwards, and of course when you're in the shower, you know that the result is coming, then it becomes much easier to do the effort.
Yeah, exactly. And usually what you see, like an improvement in heart rate variability, from cold plunging?
Yeah, I would see my stress levels go down. Absolutely.
It's interesting.
So, like for example, earlier today, I was on a debate on national TV regarding sunlight, and of course, being live on national TV is a certain amount of stress. And then I make sure to have a cold shower in front of that, because I know that will calm me down before the debate. So you can use it to take control of your physiology, and for you, of course, you should ask any of your customers, to make sure to track their heart rate variability before and after you go in and change their indoor environment.
No, it's a brilliant point. Yeah, definitely. I think everybody should do that. It's definitely something that has been kind of a missing piece here, that I think is really important. I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation and touch on it. All right, so where can they get the Pulse Cure book?
They can get it anywhere on Amazon or wherever you order your online books. It's a normal both paperback and an ebook and an audiobook. So
Amazing.
if you have an iPhone, you can download it for. I don't think it's even expensive to have the audiobook or the ebook on your phone. So you can get it right now if you go to your phone. So and the paperback can also be ordered, and it's probably not in the local stores, but you would be able to get it.
That's amazing, and it's in 7 different languages.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
so
awesome.
It's been weird, So because I'm really just a normal doctor, so suddenly writing a book that just makes a hit like that from coming from nowhere, because the concept of doing this that we have been talking about before in Norway before the book was not known, and now everybody knows about it. Now people stop me on the street and on the airport, and suddenly I'm kind of a celebrity that people contact. So, and it's all, and part of it is because of the book, because it explains lifestyle strategies and in a simple way, but it also because it points to these incredible tools that have not been they have been underestimated by the medical community, but it's something that takes power from the healthcare system and the doctors and the practitioners and puts it into your hands, and changes everything. So that's the reason.
No, that's well said. I think it could be a little strange to be recognized in the street after you do something like that and get the word out and have a lot of success, and but it's well deserved. So thank you for writing the book and getting that word out, and I'm glad people are receptive and latching onto it, and more importantly, using that information to benefit themselves and make their families healthier. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to reach out? Obviously, they could buy the book. They can learn more about you there. Do you have any social media followings, websites, anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm on Dr. Torkil. It's a dr.torkil. But I'm also building up more of my English speaking, which is a lot smaller, which would be doc_Torkil, where I will only put out English speaking content. While the Norwegian one, even though I have a lot of English speaking content, it's also filled with a lot of Norwegian activity, of course, but which is, almost 40,000 people there.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you for being here today and taking time with us to share your wisdom. If you haven't gotten the book, if you haven't heard of the book, please get it. I know I'm going to get it, and I can't wait to learn all about how the pulse can be something that we can actually track and use to measure and succeed in the quest of better health. So, Dr. Torkil, thank you so much for being here today, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Michael, for having me on your show. Thank you.